What's going on, everybody, and welcome to Event Marketing Redefined. I am your host, Matt Kleinrock, CEO of Rockway Exhibits and Events. And today we have a bit of a case study episode for you. And I am joined once again by Mollie Stahl, Senior Account Executive here at Rockway Exhibits and Events. Mollie, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me back. Glad to be here.
You got it. Well, you worked your ass off on this one, and it's a very cool project. And so just so everybody knows what we're talking about today is we're talking about a project that we call the Publix Plaza, right? Publix, I assume most people know who they are, but they are a grocery store food chain is the way you would describe them. And this project actually is what we would consider like an outdoor branded environment, and it's at an arena. Right. So the point of this this case study and kind of what we want to walk you through today is that branded environments are becoming more and more popular for brands to sort of cement themselves either in communities or where their customers are or they are going. So we executed this one for Publix, and we want to walk you through conceptually, strategically, how we went about this. We didn't just sketch something up and start to build stuff down at the Amalie Arena. So basically, the Amalie Arena is in downtown Tampa, and it is where the Tampa Bay Lightning play. It's a hockey team, NHL. On the front side of this arena is what they call Thunder Alley, and it's a big, big space as you're approaching the arena. You know, it has some cool structures out there, has some other sponsors that are sort of branded out there. And it's a very cool area to kind of hang out prior a game, right? There's a lot to do. The opposite side of this arena was a blank, open, like cobblestone area that sits on the backside in an up and coming neighborhood in Tampa. And essentially, Publix leased this space or partnered with the Tampa Bay Lightning to basically activate and kind of take control of the space and do something with it. So they came to us and said, hey, we have this space. We'd like to do something super cool. And that's kind of what we're going to walk you through today. So Mollie, tell me a little bit about what happened when Publix came to us and kind of presented this challenge, this opportunity.
I think a good backstory is too, like the Tampa Bay Lightning were just doing great, right? And so Publix is one of their main sponsors, right? At the event, they get a lot of traffic there. I'm from Tampa, so I'm a big Lightning fan. Games are awesome. And then they basically, like you said, they have like Thunder Alley down there that has a lot of their different sponsors over there. And then they presented with Publix that they could also get an area of the space. And they had a couple of different options, but this area that you're talking about was the VIP entrance to the arena. And so it wasn't the main entrance, but on the side. And they basically wanted to have that entire space. I mean, like you kind of described it, but it was like, it kind of looks as big as like a baseball field right there, right? Like it's a big concrete with pavers down there. There was really nothing going on there before the space.
It's dead space.
Dead space completely. It was the VIP entrance to the arena, right? And so there really wasn't anything going on there. You have these different club members going into the arena right there. And Channelside downtown, if you follow Tampa or anything, it's really just up and coming city. And like there's high rises down there. It's kind of that market, that clientele, right? Of like these VIP people. So Publix really wanted to establish themselves right there. And then on the plus side, they have a Greenwise market that it's kind of like a subsection of Publix, and their market, Greenwise market, is right on the corner as well on that same street that the Publix Plaza is now currently at. So they wanted to be there close to the store to have the connection.
So I think like two really cool pieces there just to hit on is when Publix took over this space and was looking to, one is this area is like a booming area of Tampa. It's absolutely growing. There's construction everywhere you look, hotels, apartments, restaurants. I mean, everything down there. So it's a key space to take over and brand. The second piece is they built a brand new Greenwise market, which is sort of like a secondary store for Publix, not their main grocery store, but it's more of like a urban city style grocery store that they are building. They're beautiful. They're absolutely wonderful to go hang out in, let alone just get your groceries, to be honest. Yeah. So I think those are really key points to this. And they essentially came to us and wanted to create an environment in this space. Now, tons of impressions, tons of people, tons of concerts, hockey games, and in the middle of a super crowded area. So I think the question that it begs is, well, now what? you're a brand, you have a space you'd like to be branded in, a partner that you're working with, an area with high traffic. So now what do you do? Because it's time, energy, money, right? So Mollie, why don't you get started? Talk to us a little bit about like our process that we took them through kind of strategically before we ever even sketched anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think a good point on this too is that they wanted this to be permanent outdoor, it wasn't removable. It had to be in the ground, weather, hurricanes, Florida. So it needed to withstand something that's going to last, like their sponsorship, I think there's like 3 to 5 years in that space. And so with the, continuous to move on. So it had to be stable. It had to be permanent. So basically, right, we walk them through our framework. I know we talk about our framework all of the time here, and we just live and breathe by it because it works. Like no matter what your guys are trying to build out, right? No matter what client is trying to build out something, if it's permanent, if it's temporary, right, up and down. So we basically just jumped on a call and like initial kickoff call about following our framework about like the why and purpose, their audience, their branding, and their goals, and walked all through all of that, right? I mean, there was multiple conversations that came about this, but really just trying to grasp those 4 points is a great starting point that we started off of.
And it takes time. It takes time. Like I think what you're describing spans over, months it took, right? But essentially, like I think the most important piece is why. Why are you spending the money to lease this space at the Amalie Arena, partnered with Tampa Bay Lightning? Like why? What's the purpose? And I think that's a big one. So why don't we run through some of the ones that they had, right? I think my favorite one, the most meaningful one to me, is that they talk a lot about connecting Publix to the community through food, which I think is super cool. And the idea is that the Greenwise Market is, it is right on the corner, right there across the street. So it is building out a space that is not just meant to hang out in prior a hockey game. It's a space built for the community where they can connect through their Greenwise Market and the foods they have in the market. That was a big one for me in terms of their sort of intention and purpose.
Yeah, I agree. And I think promote, like what they say, like promote the brand, connect the customers to the community, to the Tampa Bay Lightning fans. It was really just connecting and kind of giving back to their customers as well.
And it's not, I think there's times, for anybody listening is like, okay, with a purpose, with a why, it doesn't have to be anything overly complex. It doesn't have to be crazy. If anything, it's like, keep it simple, stupid, right? It's simple. Like Publix knows that this community is one of their biggest customer bases, and it's an important community to them. So it's like, hey, the community utilizes this space. The community goes to the Amalie Arena. They support the hockey team. So it's like, we want to get in the middle of this and drive as much value and anything that we can towards these people and let them know like, hey, we're here to support this community. And I think it's a great why.
Yeah, I agree. And then they also had like to go more on like the strategy sessions, right, that we were having. So then we put together this document that we always came back to with Publix, right? It was like the vision notes and details about like the why and the purpose, what you just went through, like the wants and accomplishments, and then kind of like Publix community details and thoughts, right? So we always had this document that we put together from like our initial framework conversations that we always all came back to. Then everyone was always consistent and clear on like what the direction was from the Publix side and from our side as we were trying to concept stuff. But like you said, this took like, a while, over a span of like 2 months of strategy sessions, trying to get to like what they're trying to achieve and what they want to get out of this before we even started putting together anything sketches.
And I think having a document, first of all, for us, it's very important, right? Having a document that sort of maps out, we do it a certain way. It's in like squares and blocks, so it's visual, but like you need something to come back to, because once you start creating, once you start designing, once you start getting in a room and throwing ideas out there, every idea could be cool, could be great. How does it tie back to what you're trying to accomplish? What's your why? What's your purpose for doing this, right? Who is the audience? Does it tie back to them, right? Like in this case, the audience is the Tampa Bay, the Channel Side, which is the name of the area in Tampa Bay, community. It's these community members. So like, figuring out what do those people have in common? Well, they all love the Tampa Bay Lightning, right? So it's like tying back these things to the community so that when you're coming up with ideas, you say to yourself, does that really tie in to the community? Does that tie into our purpose? Does that tie into the Publix brand, right? When you talk branding side, I mean, Publix is very strict about their brand. They are who they are. They are firm on it, and they're not going to go do something that would be totally off brand. Or if there was this cool idea, they'd be like, that's not really us. And I think that's super, super important. And why having a document like this to then go create and design is very, very important as you go through a big project like this.
Right. Yeah. And I even think like, kind of like one of their wants and accomplishments moving towards the next part of it was like creating a destination where people want to go. Right. So like, they have a lot of hockey games, they have different, sports tournaments there, concerts, comedians, a lot of things come in and out of that arena. And so they did want to create obviously an environment that they could have up there to have like, mini tailgates, little parties before these, bigger events, but then also when it's not, being activated in, what can be happening there. So you mentioned like apartments being built right there, right? A bunch of high rises, a lot of people moving in that area. With people working from home, right? If someone wants to get outside and just start working there, go, grab lunch or, just get outside. There is an area that they wanted to create that people would come to when there's not a concert or there's not a hockey game or, something going on. So they also wanted to create an environment that people would want to come to all of the time, which I thought was really awesome.
And much of like what you just described there. So those are like their goals, right? We call them wants and accomplishments or whatever, but like, that's all this concept of beginning with the end in mind. So like, if you're going to build something, you have to know what you want on the other side of it. So wanting to get it to be considered some kind of landmark, that's a want that they want through this project, right? Having this like space that they can activate for large events or different community things, that's a want, right? It's a goal. Having this multi-purpose community space where you can eat, you can work, you can play, you can hang, all these different things. That is keeping a project like this grounded in the direction when you decide. I mean, you could build anything in a space like this. It's huge. You could build anything you want. You can come up with the craziest idea, but having this foundational element allows you to then go get creative people in the room and start having conversations about what are we going to design? What are we going to create? And does everything tie back? And then once you start building and designing, it makes everything feel more authentic and real. And you're not taking these crazy shots with design to where you come back with a first design and people are like, how on earth did we get here? Right? Like, how are we here? Because you're following certain parameters, you're setting those, and you're really trying to understand what you want the space to be. Mollie, what were some of your favorite parts of like the concepting and the strategizing in the beginning of this? Because I think it's the most important piece, because everybody can design, everybody can find contractors to build and install. That's all there, right? But what were some of your favorite parts in the front of this?
Yeah, so one of my favorite parts too, and I do want to hit more home on what you just said, because like you have to have this document because people are like, oh, I want to see stuff. Can you guys just design it? Like you have to have these values to be able, because if you showed someone something, they're like, well, I don't like that. And then they keep, you could go through so many revisions after revisions. So I think that's you have to start with this. But then some of my favorites were that we actually were looped into with the Publix creative team as well. So they were able to like come on, right? We're talking with their, the marketing employees, right? But then they even looped into like their content creators, their branding people, their creative team as well. And we were all very collaborative on multiple calls throughout. I think the strategy sessions lasted like 2 to 3 months of this before we really started like really designing this. And so just bringing in like both groups of people that really needed to be involved for me was like key, because looping in their creative side, their branding, and their marketing team, it all has to align with it because they are a big brand. This is going to be seen by a lot of people, right? Like you said, the NHL and the arena. So just looping in and having these sessions with them back and forth and hearing their thought, pitching ideas back and forth. It was fun because it was creative and just hearing different perspectives and talking with their creative team.
I really liked some of the thoughts and ideas that came from this. Not everything got ran with, right? Like I think one of the ideas we had was to have a container that was growing fresh produce in the space, like a sunroom, green room or something. Like there's a lot of ideas that we're tying back to, like I said, having a foundation when you're working on a large project like this. We had a section here that I'm just looking at that was like details and thoughts. It was things that were just coming up. And like one of the big ones is, and again, I keep harping on going back to the fact that if you have to know your purpose, you got to know your why. You have to understand the audience very clearly. You have to understand your brand, and you have to understand goals and what you're trying to accomplish, because it should come back to it. And one of the things here, it just lets you know how the details tie in, was like needs shade and seating. And it's such a simple thing to think, but it is. If you have people in the community, it's Florida, it's Tampa. Like it's hot. Nobody wants to be outside. No one's going to hang out in a space where they're baking like they're in an oven. And that sounds so silly, but it's not. It's like common sense of when you have things lined up. The idea we had, there's a question here. It says, what is the experience at night? Is there lighting and is there projection? Because it is an area that's busy at night. And if you don't know the area and if you don't know the audience, you're not really thinking about that. But it is an area that's busy at night. And I think those little nuggets for me are things that I find very helpful as you're kind of moving through this process. So let's talk a little bit about what was actually created for them in this space.
Yeah. And so I think another point of this too is like their branding, right? So like they really wanted everyone to know that they're in the Publix Plaza when they're in there, right? And so really, after all going through, all of the strategy sessions, we actually ended up coming up with like a big archway for the front of the plaza, because there was kind of like I described earlier, kind of like a baseball field. But before that, there's like this pathway that you can go in from the street that you walk down into like this ballpark or baseball field.
It's a big entranceway.
Yep. So big entranceway. And so they really wanted people to know, like, because there's a bunch of trees that kind of block inside of that baseball field area. That's just how I'm describing it. But they really just wanted a big entrance, big grand like archway. So we put like just a giant archway, and we really looked at like the architecture that was down in channel side area as well, that aligned with the, you can't just have this eyesore that doesn't fit in with like the atmosphere down there, right? So we really went down there when we did site visits, right? Looked at what's going to make sense to be down here, making sure that it was still true to Publix and not totally left field or not super green wise, right? It just needed to be true to Publix. But we put in a big grand entrance sign that said Publix Plaza, backlit, 3D letters at nighttime, because like you said, it is a different atmosphere at the night. And so you had to keep that in mind when designing it. And then the back of the sign was resembled a net for hockey, because that was another element to this that you had to also, it's Publix Plaza, but it's at the Amalie Arena for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So we also had to incorporate the Tampa Bay Lightning into this. They could not be lost. And then on the sides actually were backlit and like just acrylic lit lightning bolts that really tied in the lighting.
Had big bolts at night. They look amazing.
Yeah, we actually had to tone down the lighting because they were too bright at night eventually. But they basically, so we tied in like Tampa Bay Lightning with the netting of the backer of where the 3D letters sit up top, and then the lightning bolts. And then it was a big archway sign, square, and it was 16 feet high or 20 feet high. So
20 by 16 or 16 by 20. It was big. I think one of the points that you hit on was big there, was that we tried to make this stuff fit in but stand out downtown. And that downtown area has a certain vibe to it. It does. It has a very modernish feel. So having everything be designed, it has to be somewhat similar, especially that arch, that big, it faces the front intersection there, the main intersection, the direction in which traffic comes from when people are walking into the games. So that sign is like front and center. It's large and in charge. It is like really sets the tone for what you're walking into. Just so happened to be lucky that in this space, there is a like dramatic walkway down a slight hill into this kind of weird baseball-ish sized space. Yeah. And then even to hit on that too, like the sign was like a wood tone with like the pop of green logo, letters in it. At daytime, it's fine, right? Because you can all see it. It's nice. And then at nighttime, the thing lights up and you don't miss it. So we have this sign, big sign lit up on the street corner. It's the entrance where everybody walks in, and that starts this kind of dramatic walk. There's landscaping. You're kind of moving down in. And then once you get down into the baseball field area, we'll call it, it is like kind of diamondish shaped per se. I would say we built these sort of architectural multi-layer decks. Do you think that would be a good way to describe them?
Yeah, I think that's a great way.
Okay, I guess that's the way they said. Great way. I think that is a decent way. And these decks were really a space, like we said, where they could activate. People could sit, people could eat, people could hang out. There was a pergola area. There are turf areas set up all over the place, set over the sort of big pavers to take away from that like cold feel. So a lot of green turf to pop color, these big, decks with the wood tones of downtown, and then tons of seating, areas to sit, stand, and really gave this kind of work, eat, play type of feel. And there were 2 decks. What were the sizes of the decks? I mean, they're pretty big. I mean, they were oddly angled in shape, but they were probably 30 feet by 30 feet. And they're big space.
Yeah, no, I think they're like 30 by 25 feet. Exactly. So they're huge. And then there was like a wheelchair ramp too, to make sure that you're abiding by everybody that can go on there, because they want everybody to enjoy it, right? Because it was a couple stairs up that you had to get onto it. So then there's a wheelchair ramp incorporated into it. Like you said, there's benches, there was, high tops there. We created like a L-shaped standing area that you could just stand there and chat. And then also like inside of the space, we incorporated like a plant box, right? That had a giant tree on it.
Fake tree. That was real tree
Inside of it with, and then, mulch and plants in there too, just to really give even more shade when you're not under the pergola section right there. And then like the turf too, like, we've been down there and like seen like, little kids playing right there, because it's just it's a nicer area to play right there. So like incorporating the turf, like you said, like broke up the harshness of it down there, still flowed with like how you go on to the decks, but then it also could be used for like, little kids just to kind of sit there and play and, while you're hanging out. And that area I feel like is really great too, because like the whole point of that, they wanted that there is for when they do activate at these different events that they'll pull in, like, for example, at one of like the grand openings that I'm sure we'll get to, they pulled in their ice cream truck in there. And so basically, had live music, had games, and then people were all over the decks, sitting there, eating their ice cream, hanging out. They had cake there too. So, it was just a great area for people to hang out and sit and kind of relax before they went into the game.
It's really kind of a community space, and it is simplistic. It looks great. It brought that space to life. But it's not rocket science. It wasn't anything crazy. I think it was done within reasonable budget, and it's all because like really, like they say, we understood the assignment. And it was a conversation with them over months about what do you want? What's the goals here? Who is this for? How are they going to utilize it? So the goal is that people there go work in those spaces, right? The goal is that before games, even if they're not activating, people might grab some food at the Greenwise Market and walk over. Same for during the day. Go to the Greenwise Market, grab lunch, go stroll over there, sit. And then I think the big unlock there is that the space is awesome for doing activations for events and downtown type of things that are going on. Like in the grand opening, when you fill that space with now like an ice cream truck or two and some, some cornhole boards and other things, and there's people in there, it fills up quick and it looks great. And people are sitting around, having a drink, eating some cake, getting ready for whatever it is that's going on. And I think we actually even talked in the ideas of like doing this like big farm to table community dinner down there and all different type of activation ideas where this space can be used, because it is completely multi-versatile, I guess you would describe it.
Yeah, I agree. And then I think kind of going back to what I kind of said earlier, and we hit on a little bit, was like, we really didn't have that many revisions of the design concepts once we started designing concepts. We've heard, countless stories how there's multiple revisions, right? 20, 30 plus, and everyone just wants to see a bunch of things. But I think one area that we didn't have revisions was because we had this document that we lived and breathed off of.
Yeah.
Everyone was under the same expectations and we're clear. So what we were presenting was not off, and they're not like, how did we get here? I think that's a cool point to this too, is that there wasn't that many revisions. Yes, there obviously were revisions, but there really wasn't that many in the grand scheme of this, because anything could have really been done here. But because we had such a long process of like the strategy sessions, we knew what we needed to deliver and we're able to do that with not that many revisions, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, look, I mean, when you're doing big projects like this, you have to sit down and think it through prior. So many people just jump into this stuff, and they are big investments. They're big partnerships. There's a lot that is happening under the hood of these jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially you can't make a $200,000 mistake, a $500,000 mistake, $1 million mistake, a 2 million. I mean, that's what these type of things cost, like you can't make a big mistake. I mean, you can, but you shouldn't, which means that you have to be considering, why are you doing it? Who is the audience? What are details about your brand that are important? What are you trying to accomplish? And diving, not just stating what those 4 things are, but diving in to, okay, the community. Let's talk about the community. Tell me more about them. Who are they? What kind of age groups? Do people have dogs in this area? Do people not? What about this? Like, you got to go deep and have all those discussions, because then that allows you to be creative. That allows you to have conversations and throw ideas out there that work. One thing on this, Mollie, that I wrote down here that I love about what Publix did and kind of what this does is it's this new way, I don't want to say it's not new, but it's like this idea of go to where the customer is. They're focused on their customer. So they're going to where their customer is. Like, that is the ultimate play. It's not guesswork. They know that community, I'll bet they know down to the percentage of the people walking into the Amalie Arena and people living down there of who are customers or who has been to Publix 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 100 times. Who knows, right? So they're going to where they are, and then they're saying to themselves, okay, how can we engage the customer? Why they're just in their normal day. We're not asking them to go somewhere. They're there. We just so happen to be there too, right? So how do we engage them? How do we drive value to them? And then how can we obviously be visually appealing, but like, can we also then activate and do special things? That one I liked. The other thing it makes me think of, a lot of people say, if you build it, they will come. Well, if they're already there, it makes that a whole lot easier. They don't have to come anywhere. They're already there. And so are you, because you know where they are. And I think the last thing they had going for them on this thing was that it's just a growing area. So it's not a no-brainer, but it's a cool space to go do something. And the other thing I'd give Publix some credit with is that they really didn't have many like monetary goals. Some people, when they do things like this, they're looking for return, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're not dumb. They know what they're doing there, but it was really more of a visionary community brand awareness type of play that they know is going to weather. They know is going to age well by where the community is, where it's going, and them cementing themselves into that community. And I think at the end of the day, everything down there will drive value to that community. So that's like one of the main pieces that I love about this whole outdoor branded environment that was built down there. Yeah,
that's great. And they were even talking about expanding it more because they feel like they need even more seating down there. So we're in the process of doing this, their 3rd phase of this, about building more seating, more benches around that area. And so it's just great because they see the value. People are coming to it, and it's been a hit so far. So it's great.
I love it. I think if there's one thing I like just stress to people listening is that if you work for a company or whatever your role is, if your agency, these are opportunities that I think more brands should be looking for. Going to where, like, finding out, like, where does your customer go? Where are they? Where do they hang out? What are things that they do? And how can you as a brand get in front of them there? So it's the most convenient exchange. And then, like I said, you're driving value. You're engaging them the way that they want to be engaged. Let me give you a bad example of this. At Hilton hotels, they offer these like free happy hours, like at Embassy Suites does them, these like free happy hours and nice breakfasts, but like, they're not just giving you those. They have people running around trying to sell you timeshares while you're eating breakfast. You're getting me where I'm at. I get it. but like, I don't want to be sold on something like that. You know what I mean? When I'm having breakfast with my family at 7 o'clock in the morning before I go to Disney for the day, and I'm already stressed. I'm already stressed out. You know what I mean? But like, this is it's this exchange. It's saying, hey, you're going to be here. This is what you do on a Saturday or Friday night, or, you know, wherever your customer goes, even if it's, you know, any time of the year, and saying, let me provide you some value. Let me get there and be out in front of it. That's just one thing that I think that more brands and people need to be thinking of when they're executing these projects and trying to go find these projects. Can we put these into our budgets? Can we go do something? What would be the return on this? What kind of activations could we run if you had a location? It's a very unique, you know, a little bit different way of doing things.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Any closing thoughts, Mollie, on this project? You spent long, you were deep in this thing. Any kind of like closing thoughts or advice for anybody maybe adventuring into a project like this?
Yeah, I mean, I know we just basically have been saying this the entire time, but it really is like, have these meetings. It's going to take a long time. If you want to do something fast, it's just not going to be possible with something like outdoor, permanent, going to where your customers are. It takes so much more thought than like a trade show does, or like a, you know, just a quick event that's up and down in 3 days. Like, you have to seriously put the time, the effort into this, have a great solid team, and have multiple people helping drive like the bus and getting this done, right? Because like these big projects, you need a lot of collaboration, you need a lot of time to it. So make sure that you're dedicated to it and just really are able to focus on this and know it's going to, you know, probably take a year to accomplish and get going.
It's a good one. I'm thinking about it. What that gets me thinking is like how people can go about thinking about something like this, right? Like my thought would be, hey, okay, first you have to get an understanding of your customer. And it is starting to think like, where do they go? What do they do? How can you find opportunities like this for your company per se, right? Or how can you find an opportunity to do something similar to this? And I think what ends up happening is just by going down that path and thinking and going outside the box is you do end up and probably end up stumbling upon either A, it could work for you, or B, that it couldn't work for you. But I think there's a lot to this, and I know we beat it to death, but it is so true. It's like, it does take some real groundwork to understand how to execute a project. It's permanent, becomes permanent. If it's there for longer than a day or two, it's permanent, you know what I mean? Or semi-permanent, but it's there for a long time. So you have to represent your brand properly. And I think it's also cool to make a splash, do something unique. Like I always think about when the Raiders built the stadium in Vegas, it's like Allegiant Stadium. They built that big flame torch in there, right? So it's like, that was something that was thought out. Like there's no way, you know, that's like an Al Davis thing. He's the owner, you know, the old owner passed away of the Raiders. And there's a story there. They didn't just say, oh, let's put something cool here. There's a conversation. There's a thought process. Anytime you're doing something that's branded environment, it's going to be there for some period of time, that represents your brand, that engages your customers. You got to be having these like really good conceptual conversations and making sure that the ideas are meaningful and not like meaningless or just, you know, just empty ideas.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's a great point.
All right, everybody, that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to us today. That's a little bit of a breakdown and case study on the Publix Plaza. We're going to be releasing more on this as we go. A whole bunch of like professional photography, a whole bunch of event photography, full breakdown case study in terms of kind of, you know, what we blabbered about today in sort of our process, how we came to designing and creating this space. Thanks for listening. It's another episode of Event Marketing Redefined. Mollie, thank you for being here. And everybody, we'll catch you next time.
Bye.